your Jeep Gladiator lifted by the dealership, because things can and do go wrong. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Rob Motive JT. So I've been thinking, I get questions on the channel, of course, once in a while about lifts. Should you lift? Shouldn't you lift? Where should you do it? What should you do? All that kind of stuff. So I've been thinking about it because I go back and forth on lifting my Jeep Gladiator still. I've put the bigger tires and all that stuff on it, but I see lifted Jeep Gladiators around every now and then, and it gives me that itch. But I start to think, gee, would I go third party, or should I have my Jeep Gladiator lifted by the dealership? And the short answer is yes, you should, because things can and do go wrong. Now, I'll give you a couple of examples. You know, I've lifted some other vehicles. I have two other channels, Rob Motive MT and Rob Motive. And on Rob Motive, I've lifted a few Toyota Tacomas. And I have to say, I have had a couple of issues where things have happened. Now, they were third-party shops. None of the aftermarket work that I've had done was done at the dealership, so all third parties. So on the first truck ever, the first Tacoma that I had lifted, it was great. It looked good, was done in a relatively expedient amount of time, but I had a rubbing problem. I drove away, all was good. Of course, it always is in a straight line. It's not until you start to put the truck through its paces that you find out if there are any issues. So I drove away. The next few days later, whatever, I went to McDonald's, pulled out, made a turn down a sharp divot or dip in the road, and I had a rub. That's because the size of tires that were put on were too big for the lift. I didn't have it up high enough. The offset was not right, whatever. Could have been a number of things. Now, it's not to say that I couldn't have gone back to that shop and hopefully they would have corrected the problem, but you never know. As it turns out, I actually went with smaller tires because I didn't want to have the lift, or the rub rather, and I didn't want to change the lift. I would have had a little bit more peace of mind if it would have been from a dealership as opposed to a third party. The second occurrence that happened with me is I went to a different third party installer, so it's not even the same one, and I had some shocks put on the front. By the way, I've talked about this on the Rob Motive channel, so if you follow both, then you know where I'm going with this. But shortly after I had the shocks put on, which gave me a lift, they were adjustable shocks, I had a noise, a clanking, a weird sensation and sound from the front part of the truck. This was, again, a Toyota Tacoma. And come to find out, apparently, and this is my guess because I don't know for sure, but apparently they had taken the caliper off of the right side, the brake caliper, so that they could have more access to put the shocks in. That's the only thing I can think of. Now, I say I'm not sure because it could have been that the caliper was not secured tightly when the truck was manufactured. I don't think that was the issue. So anyway, the bolts weren't tightened down enough on the caliper. It was moving around and it was clanking and making noise. It was that loose, particularly when I would engage the brakes, of course, because the caliper is then functioning. Another issue that I had with a third-party shop. So as I fast forward to today, and I consider lifting the Jeep Gladiator, I gotta say, I don't have a lot of faith in these third-party shops to actually do the job properly and not have any issues. And the peace of mind that you get in going with the dealership is that, number one, they have a reputation to maintain. They're a big dealership, probably. They're also probably a franchisee of Jeep or Stellantis as a whole. So they have to maintain standards, and you do have warranty, and that's the big kicker. Anything that you have done at the dealership is going to be covered under the dealership warranty, even if they farm it out to a third party, which, let's be clear about that. most dealerships are going to farm it out to a third party to have the work done. So if you take your Jeep Gladiator in to have, let's say, the Mopar lift, the 2-inch lift installed, they're going to farm that out. But what's good for you is that it's going to be covered under the dealership. You're going to have that warranty. Now, if you're going to lift it, I would say the best time to lift it is probably from day one, when you first buy it, before you even pick it up and bring it home. Reason being is that a lot of times the dealership will cover the warranty or cover the lift for that 3-year, 36,000 miles. That's a nice thing to have, because I think if you do it after the fact, depending on the dealership probably, you're probably only going to get a 1-year warranty. Although that can vary, again, depending on the dealership's policies and what they're offering. So there is a lot of value in having it done, or peace of mind anyway, in having it done right from the get-go so that you can stick it under that 3-year, 36,000 mile brand new Jeep Gladiator warranty. So you've got 3 years for anything crazy to happen. And not that anything should. You know, if the lift is installed properly, there really shouldn't be any issues with it. I mean, no more than you would have with just your normal suspension that you get from the manufacturer to begin with. And if you're going with a block and spacer type lift, they're just that, blocks and spacers, basically hunks of steel. Once they're positioned in the right spot, assuming everything is tightened down, torqued down, fastened down properly, you really shouldn't have any issues at all. And I think the biggest concerns that you have when you do that kind of a lift, a block and spacer that is the tires, the size that you put on. Because in my experience, the only issues I've had, other than that crazy brake caliper thing, was rubbing. And that's something that you never want. And of course, if that's severe enough, you could actually tear up the fender well in the front. You're never going to have rubbing in the back unless you go with like a John Deere tractor tire size or something. But in the front, as you turn, of course, you can grab the fender well. You can even rip out the liner. I actually saw that not too long ago. There was a truck driving down the road, obviously lifted, and the fender liner was bouncing around. And I know that's because it was being impacted by the tire that was too big, and it had torn it away from its securement. Those little plug-like things that stick in, which, by the way, if you didn't know, you may have a handful of screws, but most of your inner fender liner is held in by those little plastic push pins. So it doesn't really take much to break them loose. Anyway, that's my advice. I would definitely have your Jeep Gladiator lifted by the dealer if it's something that you're going to do. Just the peace of mind of hopefully knowing that they're going to do it right, and the warranty that's provided along with it is definitely enough to pay a little bit more money. And let's face it, it's probably going to cost you more money to have it done at the dealership, but it's well worth it. Anyway, leave a comment. Let me know. Have you had your Jeep Gladiator lifted by a third party? Did you have any problems, including tire rub? I'd be curious to know. Also, real quick, I do have 2 additional channels. Rob Motive, all about the Toyota Tacoma, and Rob Motive MT, all about mini trucks. Currently, the 2022 Hyundai Santa Cruz. Check them out, and if you're interested, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. Bye.